What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Tesla stock, ticker symbol TSLA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day. Wednesday, April 10th. All right, guys, nice day for Tesla here, up $3.90 per share. That's plus 2.25%, finishing right ahead of that very, very important psychological and technical level of that bottom of that channel, 177.50. Listen, let's take a look at this thing here today and get as good of a grasp as we can on this name heading into tomorrow by pulling out all the possible bias that the market will give us here today. And I'm talking everything, and we'll do it in 10 minutes or less. Ready? Let's take a look. Let's start with our volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. Listen, hey, by the way, Tesla is a daily upload now here on the Roensch Capital Charts channel. Hits every single day at 5 p.m. Eastern time. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. Helps out tremendously. Now, the most important moves that I'm interested in looking at the volume profile on here today on Tesla is going to be that quick little, dump off heading into the open, and then that rip, and then fade that followed. And then this move into the close, into that 177.40 beginning of that channel. Those are the only two moves I'm really interested in here today on Tesla. So what we're doing here is we're looking for bias. We're peeling back a layer of the onion and seeing, okay, is there bias that supports the move, is indifferent to the move, or actually goes against the move? And all three of those are certainly possible here. So let's take a look. Listen, we get the open. On a normal day, we expect the volume to look kind of like a U shape, with the right side being finishing the day at the close, which is actually this bar here, maybe 1/3 to 2/3 of the way, or the size, I should say, as the open. Okay, but here we get a very out of context big push on that upside move, which tells me that, listen, there's tremendous bullish bias on that move. And then even better, what we see is as the move itself starts to pull back and fade, what do we see? We see market participants, the volume jumps off a cliff. It tanks. Okay? If this had stayed like a pyramid shape, well, then the bullish bias and the bearish bias evens itself out. We see that all the time. That's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing an obvious bullish bias on that upside move to 179.22. And then as soon as the fade begins, people vanish. Market participants disappear, stop betting on the move that's occurring at that particular time, which shows us there's a bullish bias that outweighs any bias we saw to the bearish side in that move. Heading into the close, this is actually rather contextual. We got quite a few consecutive green bars, but the size of the volume was really nothing out of the ordinary. You see this big green bar here after the close. That's very common on these blue chips. You can see it actually doesn't contribute to a whole heck of a lot of movement. That candle is actually just kind of a couple of wicks with basically a doji. And what we're seeing there is fund and institutional rebalancing. Okay, so I tend to ignore that bar, unless we see like a really obvious move occur in the actual candle. Now let's move on to the self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels by time frame, only looking at the time frames that have the most eyeballs, with a very simple setup here. I'm only interested in the psychology here, so I have the 50 period and the 200 period. All right. Now yesterday we had reclaimed both of those levels in a single day, which was great to see. Today we came down, the 50 period crossed over. The crossover itself means nothing to me, but I like that the 50 period is a quicker moving average, so it can stick with the stock as a psychological protecting barrier potentially. All right, at least that's the idea. You see a retest of the 50 period off the open, and boom, a high volume pop. That is beautiful. Okay, we didn't really see a retest of the 50 period yet yesterday when we reclaimed them. We saw that now today. This is great to see. It's now in an ascending pattern. That's a good thing to see if you're a bull on the 30-minute chart, at least from a very zoomed in perspective. All right. Any retest of that 50 period, you're going to want to see a high volume bounce similar to what we saw this morning if you're a bull. Bears, priority number one on the 30-minute chart is to get back below that 50 period and get back into kind of a descending pattern where that 50 period is trending downside and the stock is rejecting off it as we go lower. Kind of the opposite of what we're seeing right now. And the 30-minute can change very quickly. So bears, you have to look at this one from a day-to-day perspective because everything can change in a day. Now, moving on here to the 4-hour chart, let's take a look. You can see here, let's take a peek. We reclaimed the 50 period on the 4-hour chart here today. We got a retest and a hold. Okay, it was a little bit sloppy. Okay, but you see that open right above there. and a push higher on pretty decent volume. Okay. Again, a positive thing to see. Bulls, any retest, going to want to see a hold of the 50 period. It's a day one break. Day one breaks are notorious for not being super reliable. So any retest, you're going to want to see that hold. Or just pull away from here since we already got kind of a retest and hold. Okay, on the day one. Bears, your priority number one here on the 4-hour chart is to reclaim that 50 period as a resistance level like we were seeing in the past few days. That's about a 2% move downside to make a retest of that. But you guys would want to see a break downside on high volume with a low volume retest, pullback, right? Like pullback upside to retest on low volume. And then boom, a high volume rejection down toward that 166.50 to 167 channel, which brings us to the daily. All right, you can see here. A couple things going on right now on Tesla. That 50-day moving average is nearby. It's at 183, okay, in that region. But look here. See, this is really good for the bulls because you guys remember we were talking about this wide channel that was made up by like two smaller channels, and we were talking about this breaking downside out of the entire thing 2 trading days ago. Okay, this is from 166.50 to 167. That's the smaller channel that forms the bottom of this larger channel, and the top end is 177.50 to about 180. We're right below the lower part of the top smaller channel that forms the larger channel, okay? Does that make sense? So bears, you want to reject off the lower portion of that top smaller channel, which is about 177.50. Ideally rejecting off that and moving back down toward the lower portion of that larger channel. Whereas bulls, we just want to be done with this whole thing altogether. This is a mess down here. Look at this. How do we get done with this whole thing? If we could reclaim 180 and get above 180 and hold, but listen, even better, a reclaim of that 50-day moving average and hold. That would be a beautiful thing. A reclaim itself is not quite enough. I need to see a hold, likely a multi-day hold, but one day at a time here. A single day hold of all of that would be the bulls, like best case scenario here in the short term. Implied volatility here, you can see it's sitting in the higher range. It's down a little bit today, but it's in the higher range compared to the last, few months here if we go back. Okay, just understand the higher that is, if you're buying new contracts, the higher the potential risk of IV crush. But if you're holding contracts, the higher IV goes, you will experience some Vega pump inside of those contracts, from that one Greek. You still, of course, need to be correct from a delta perspective, directionally, but a little extra Vega pump to help you lose a bit less if you're wrong directionally, or make a bit more if you're correct directionally. Never hurts. Now, let's take a look at the expected move. Okay, the next expiration we have here on Tesla is Friday at the close, April 12th. The expected move that the traders in the market are expecting here, the one standard deviation expectation by the close on Friday, is plus or minus $6.80 per share. Now, we have no earnings or anything between now and then. So if we divide that by the 3 trading days we have left this week, that gives you about $2.27 per share. What I like to do is add 50% to that to make up for the fact that that assumes a green or red streak. Okay, so a mix of green and red days potentially. And that gives us a market expectation of about plus or minus $3.40 per share per day, or tomorrow more so, because this will change tomorrow. So tomorrow the market expects approximately plus or minus $3.40 of movement. That's the one standard deviation range. Of course, it's not going to be correct all the time, but that is currently the volatility expectation in Tesla, being literally priced in by the big sample size of traders at each expiration. Okay, so we do the volume profile, we do all the psychological levels, all the technicals. That gives us a good idea to start forming a directional bias. We do the volatility expectation to help us position ourselves more effectively, especially if we're trading options. And now there's one more thing we can do for directional bias, right? The chain, the options bias. 1.82 million total contracts traded just today. 933,000 of those were calls. 890,000 of those were puts. So it's slight, okay, but just a slight overall call side bias on the overall call put ratio. But look at this, guys. The 0 to 20 delta range, those are those far out of the money, shortest term expiration contracts on average. I call this the short term speculator delta range, 0 to 20. 287,000 calls in that range, 335,000 puts. So the short term speculators are actually leaning a little bit to the put side, whereas the overall leaning just very slightly to the call side, okay, which of course factors in the more at the money and in the money contracts, more mid and longer term perspectives. Listen, guys, if you got value out of this video, please leave a like, leave a comment if you guys have any votes for wildcard stocks coming up. The wildcard stock is a daily upload that hits at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time every single day, and it's voted on by you guys in the comment section. So comment your ticker for the wildcard. Tesla, of course, is a daily upload. Subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.